How many pieces must a soul lose before someone dares to call it whole? At the edge of an unnamed village where roads forgot where they were going, a woman without a voice walked barefoot over fragments that once were promises. No one knew where she came from, nor why her eyes clung only to the stones. Children whispered her name as Shard, for she always looked one breath away from breaking. The elders said she carried something even death had refused, but she kept walking night after night, gathering small things the world had discarded. A rusted button, a bent nail, a shard of mirror that smelled of memory. She placed them in a splintered wooden box with broken hinges as if they were relics. And maybe they were. For every shelter begins with something the world has decided no longer matters. Shard did not speak, but she listened. And in her listening, she collected broken words that slipped from doorways and park benches. There was a silence in her so vast it seemed her skin was made of absence, and still, she held space. One dusk, she stood before a house with boarded-up windows long abandoned. She didn't move, as if waiting for the house to speak. And it did. Not in words, but in a warm wind that breathed from within, carrying the scent of something burnt, maybe bread, maybe memory. She opened the box, picked up the mirror shard, looked into it, and for the first time, did not see reflection. She saw a map, because sometimes, shelter is not a place. It is the moment when what remains of you recognizes what remains of the world. Only what is broken can truly hear the broken. Shard returned to the house each day, not to claim it, but like one who sits beside a river just to remember that it flows. The boards still sealed the windows, but the wind began to speak deeper, sweeping dust and delivering echoes. One day, she found a blue feather wedged in the door's edge, too light to have lasted the years. Perhaps a sign, perhaps only a lost wing. She placed it in the box. Over time, the children stopped fearing her. They followed at a distance, mimicking her gaze to the ground, hands open. Shard never pushed them away. She walked slow, like someone unburdened by destination. One day, a girl handed her a coat button. "I think it's special," she said. And it was. Every object given without reason carries a truth that needs no language. The house, with its rotting beams and flaking walls, became a kind of mirror, too. Here her fragments didn't seem out of place. Cracks in the ceiling sketched secret constellations. Slits in the boards let in light shaped like lament. That morning, the bent nail she'd saved fit perfectly into one window's edge. The first repair. Small, unseen. Not the kind done to fix a world, but the kind made when one accepts it was never meant to be flawless. For there are structures born not from blueprint but from ruin, and shelters that reveal themselves only when we stop looking for doors. What is fragile learns to lean against what has already fallen. One violet dusk, Shard stacked 3 bricks at the doorstep of the old house. Not to build, but to say, "I am here." She sat in silence, her back against the worn frame, and let the hours pass through her like wind through lace. From her box, she took the rusted button, tied it with a strip of cloth she'd found, hung it above the door frame. It wasn't decoration. It was invocation. The next morning, the girl returned with a colored piece of glass. "From the chapel that isn't anymore," she whispered. Shard held it to the light. Colors burst across her face like the world had not yet forgotten beauty. She placed it in the box, gently, as if it were alive. More offerings came. An old man left a pin. A boy, a piece of wood with a heart carved into it. No one explained. No one needed to. Shard placed each gift upon the stone table at the center of the house. There was still no roof. Rain still came in, and yet something held. Something stayed. That night, she dreamed. A tree grew from her chest, roots into her arms, branches through her eyes. She woke with soil beneath her nails. Didn't know if she had been digging or if the dream had planted her. Some shelters are not built. They blossom. And if there are roots, even in fragments, something can begin to grow. Sometimes it's not the world that changes. It's the silence that begins to speak. One afternoon, while sweeping dry leaves from the floor, Shard found an envelope wedged between two broken floorboards, tied with a faded blue ribbon. No name. Inside, a square of fabric stitched with one word: return. She didn't understand, or she understood too well. She sat down and pressed the cloth to her chest as if it still held a pulse. The house breathed with her. Every movement she made brought whispers from the wood, creaks, groans, like old memories clearing their throat. One morning, the front door swung open by itself. She wasn't startled. She picked up her box, stepped across the threshold, and sat on the steps until the sun touched her feet. A woman arrived, older, carried a quilt made of patchwork and silence. "I saw you in dream," she said. "The house told me to come." She handed over the quilt and left. Shard folded it, placed it upon a stone platform that now resembled a bed. There was now a bed. And on the bed, remembrance. More objects came. A carved spoon, a key without a door, a blank notebook. Everything meaningless, everything holy. The house that once held emptiness now held offerings, not to be used, but to be witnessed. Because true shelter isn't made from what we have, but from what we choose to hold, even if we don't know why, even if we're still in pieces. What's forgotten begins to sing when it finds someone listening. On the third night of rain, water streamed down the house's walls like a cleansing ritual, not only of dust but of time. Shard woke to a sound she couldn't name, not dripping, not wind. Something between weeping and melody. She followed it barefoot until it led her to a cupboard she'd never opened. Its hinges resisted as though reluctant to reveal what they'd hidden. Inside, a small box wrapped in fabric, not like hers. Lighter in the hand, heavier in presence. Inside, a smooth black stone, etched with symbols she couldn't read, but her hands could. It wasn't a mirror. It was a remembering. It didn't show her face. It showed her roots. She placed it on the stone table, lit a candle without knowing why. She hadn't learned rituals, but the gesture moved through her as if from a much older place. The flame touched the stone's surface, and for a moment, she didn't see herself. She saw a lineage of silent women holding similar boxes with weathered eyes and offering hands. None of them spoke. All of them listened. The next day, she drew a spiral on the dirt floor with charcoal. The children asked what it was. She only smiled and motioned for them to sit. For the first time, she opened her mouth, not to speak, but to sing. A wordless sound, ancient, slow, that made the ceiling tremble gently, like even the shelter now had a soul of its own. Because sometimes, it's not we who find shelter. It's shelter that has waited far too long to be found again. Some houses were never built from wood, but from promises that were never broken. The rain stopped, but the sound remained. Now each crack in the house exhaled soft notes as if the air itself had learned to breathe in minor key. Shard wandered through the rooms as one moves through the corridors of their own ribs. Each corner held an object, each object, a memory that wasn't quite hers. The button, the nail, the mirror shard, the feather, the quilt, the black stone, none were debris now. They were vows, from someone, from many, from all who once left something behind, hoping one day someone might call it whole. The children returned, this time with their parents. The girl brought her own box, filled with beads and dried leaves. The elder with the pin brought a wooden stool to stay. No one asked permission. They didn't need to. The house already belonged to them, not by ownership but by belonging. That day, sunlight fell in a new way across the walls. It made dust dance mid-air like some secret celebration. Shard knelt and widened the spiral, lining it with seeds, dry ones, gathered over time. In the center, she placed the box, not to bury it, but to plant it. That night, they all slept there, some on woven mats, some against old beams. And by dawn, the house felt wider, not by renovation, but by breath. Because some shelters don't hold bodies, they hold returns. And every return is the seed of what will one day bloom. Who told you had to be whole to be home? On the morning of the 7th day, Shard rose before the others. The sky was still dressed in coal gray, and dew blanketed the rooftops like prayer. She walked to the edge of the forest, where trees speak only through touch. There she buried her box. Not in farewell, but in rooting. She no longer needed to carry the fragments, for now they lived in the wood, in the light, in the breath of all who had once been forgotten. The house, like her, was no longer shelter. It was soil, a place where ruin and root embraced without needing explanation. When she returned, a child was awake, drawing circles into the dust. "It's warm in here," the child whispered. Shard nodded and smiled. For the first time, she no longer looked like glass. Not because her cracks had vanished, but because they now carried light. Someone had hung an empty frame on the wall. Inside it, only air. But it was enough. Every frame asks to be seen, and the seeing itself, that too shelters. The final image is her, sitting on the threshold, palms open in her lap, feeling the wind press gently against her wrists as if to say, "I stayed." And maybe that is what shelter really is, the place where even the wind decides to stay. Because it's never what you lost that keeps you from belonging. It's what you still fear to call your own. If any part of you still hears wind inside, stay. The house has already begun. Follow the echo on the hidden path.